Danielle's lipstick was the color of a wet traffic cone and about as subtle. She perched at the head of the HR conference room like a crow on a power line, overdressed, overconfident, and overcaffeinated. Behind her sat a fresh stack of manila folders, each labeled with someone's career in 14-point calibri. Mine was on top. "Thanks for coming in, Nancy. This should only take a few minutes," she said, flashing a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. The door clicked shut behind me. No witnesses, no union rep, just me, Danielle, and a framed motivational poster of a mountaintop that read "The future is now." She launched into a monologue so polished it smelled like it had been laminated, words like streamline, organizational synergy, redundant functionality. I didn't even blink. 11 years. I'd seen 3 CEOs, a data breach, 2 acquisitions, and a global pandemic. I'd held this department together with duct tape, compliance audits, and 3 AM risk disclosures. But apparently, Danielle's 2 months at the company and a certificate in change leadership from LinkedIn University gave her the right to swing the axe. "We'll be removing your credentials from the registry today," she chirped, handing me a stapled exit packet like it was a Starbucks receipt. "Per the agreement, your professional liability designation will be terminated immediately." Shouldn't be a problem. Legal already reviewed it. A small red flag waved in the back of my brain, but I tucked it neatly into the pocket of my blazer. I didn't argue, didn't correct her, didn't mention that my designation was the only reason half our government contracts were still insured, or that the policy itself had a clause written in 2013 that made me non-replaceable under current federal guidelines. That would have ruined the show. Instead, I signed 4 pages, initialed the bottom like I was checking off a grocery list. I even thanked her for the opportunity with the kind of deadpan smile that HR usually misreads as closure. "If you're still with me, first off, bless your attention span. And second, if you're into these kinds of corporate horror stories where HR accidentally sets the company on fire with a single bad decision, maybe go ahead and hit that subscribe button and tap the like. Keep stories like this rolling, and honestly, it lets the team know they're not shouting into the void." Anyway, back to the fire. Danielle's final act was to slide across a tiny blue envelope containing a company-branded stress ball and a QR code to life after layoffs, a mindfulness journey. As if a lavender-scented podcast could mop up the crater they were about to walk into. "Do you have any questions?" she asked, already turning toward her monitor like I'd vanished. "Just one," I said, standing. "Where should I leave my badge?" Her eyes flicked up, caught something in my voice, then flicked away. "Front desk is fine." By the time I walked back to my office, correction, my former office, word had already spread like microwave fish in the break room. A few brave souls poked their heads out of cubicles. Mark from compliance gave me a confused thumbs up. Sheila in legal just mouthed, "What the hell?" I gave her a little shrug. Inside, the air still smelled like eucalyptus from my desk diffuser. I took a moment, let the silence settle. Then I opened the bottom drawer, reached past the coffee-stained HR memos, and pulled out the small black binder. Leather, worn, and absolutely priceless. Inside were photocopies of every underwriting memo, credentialing approval, and legal note from the year we landed the R17 compliance account, the one that made us solvent. The one that required a very specific combination of licenses and certifications, mine. Not transferable, not replicable. Most importantly, not optional. I tucked it into my tote, took one last glance around the office, then turned off the light. They thought they'd saved money. What they'd done was set the insurance clock ticking, and it had 12 hours left before the whole damn policy imploded. By lunchtime, my old chair was already occupied by an ergonomic mannequin named Jason, fresh from Danielle's personal shortlist of agile team players. He was younger, louder, and wore cologne that smelled like Mountain Dew, got into a fistfight with a scented candle. He'd been at the company for 7 weeks. His last job was at a juice startup that went bankrupt selling broccoli-infused wellness shots. And now, he was in charge of high-risk liability oversight. You could practically hear the contracts weeping. Word spread faster than flu in an open office plan. People came by pretending to grab printer paper just to sneak a glance through my open door. Some lingered in the hallway with mugs they didn't need refilled. Nobody said anything at first, but I could feel the questions chewing at the edges of their professionalism. Sheila from legal was the first to crack. "You're leaving? What? Why?" She whispered, half panicked. "Who's going to sign off on the FEC filings? You're the only one certified for. I'm sure Jason will figure it out," I said, gently tucking a stapler into a box like I wasn't mentally picturing the entire audit process combusting in his hands. "But your license, already removed," I said with a smile so calm it gave her a wrinkle. Danielle, for her part, popped her head in mid-afternoon like a cruise director checking if I'd finished packing. "Hey, just a heads up, it'll be deactivating your access at 5. Do you need a dolly or anything for your stuff?" "I've got it," I replied. She lingered a second too long. Legal had a few questions about transition paperwork, but I told them we're covered. Jason's onboarding includes risk compliance certs. I said nothing, because the urge to laugh might have cost me my last thread of dignity. Jason's certs were probably a 2-hour HR module and a badge sticker that said ask me about liability. Meanwhile, the binder in my bag contained the holy grail of underwriter memoranda. The original approval stamped with my name, back when I was one of only 7 certified risk authorities grandfathered into the system under pre-2010 rules. That number had since dropped to 3, and 2 of them had retired, but sure, let's throw Jason at it. The binder wasn't flashy. Black leather, faded corners, no digital copy, no backups, just one original, one scanned image on my encrypted USB drive at home, and one old colleague in DC who still owed me a favor. It had survived 3 office moves, a flood, and a CFO with a god complex. It wasn't just a paper trail. It was my insurance, my nuclear option. I slid it into my tote between a dead succulent and a novelty mug that said keep calm and lawyer up. Around 3:45, Greg from finance appeared in my doorway looking like someone had unplugged his espresso machine. Danielle said, "You're going." "That's right," I said, taping up my second box. "Jesus, Nancy, you've got oversight on the Calhoun project. And the federal files. And what about the quarterly risk certs? I'm sure someone else will pick up the slack," I echoed, gently mocking Danielle's earlier words. His eyes narrowed like he wanted to argue but didn't quite know how. Because technically, they'd signed the paperwork. They'd approved the removal of my license from the firm's professional liability registry. Greg, for all his spreadsheet wizardry, had never bothered to read the part of the policy that hinged on that specific license still being active. By 4, the office was back to pretending nothing had happened. My name was already off the door. My inbox was redirected to Jason. I left my keycard on the front desk, gave the receptionist a genuine smile, and stepped into the elevator like I hadn't just unplugged their entire insurance scaffolding. No one chased after me. No alarm sounded. Just the soft ding of the elevator doors and the weight of that binder in my bag, quiet, solid, and humming like a fuse. The hum of the fridge was the only sound in my apartment that night, aside from the occasional creak of aging floorboards and the soft, low purr of the tabby I inherited from my sister. I'd poured myself a glass of wine, not celebratory, just quiet. Something red and dry and 3 days open. The kind of wine you drink after 11 years of keeping a company safe from its own recklessness. My laptop screen lit the room in that familiar blue glow. Not the glow of corporate dashboards or contract portals. This time it was personal. I logged into the National Risk Register, a site with all the charm of a DMV form stapled to a blinking cursor. My credentials were still active, still verified, still tied to every policy my name had ever underwritten. Across 5 clients, 3 verticals, and 1 firm that now believed Jason from Juice World could pick up the slack. The cursor blinked. The request to surrender credential tab sat waiting. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a checkbox confirming I understood the implications. Yes, then a drop-down for reason. I selected, no longer affiliated with sponsoring organization. The irony almost made me laugh. They had pushed me out and gifted me this choice, like handing a locksmith the master key on their way out the door. I glanced at the clock, 11:57 p.m., clicked submit. The system churned for a moment. The kind of slow, government-mandated confirmation loop that makes you wonder if anything's actually happening behind the scenes. But then, 11:58 p.m., credential surrender confirmed. Notice sent to associated insurers. Active coverage may be affected. That was the line that mattered. May be affected was compliance speak for y'all are officially screwed and don't know it yet. I minimized the window, opened a new tab, logged into my personal risk monitoring alert system, something I'd set up years ago when I realized nobody at the company actually knew how to read underwriter feedback unless it came with bullet points and clip art. The system hadn't pinged yet. These things take a minute. I sat back. Let the silence settle in again. At 12:03 a.m., my phone buzzed once. A single vibration. I didn't even have to pick it up. I knew what it was. Alert, risk compliance breach coverage flagged, level RED. Somewhere in the insurer's back-end system, a little red box had just lit up with our company's name inside it. Not because someone made a claim, not because of a lawsuit, but because the sole credential holding the entire risk umbrella together just disappeared into thin air. Like yanking out the one Jenga block that looks safe until the whole tower groans. They wouldn't know right away. Not until a client ran a quarterly check. Not until the automated audit cycle pinged the breach. Or the auditors stumbled over a missing designation and realized, oh no, but it had started. I closed the laptop slowly, set it on the table. The cat, sensing the shift in mood, jumped onto my lap and curled into a warm little loaf. I scratched behind his ears, took one long breath, and leaned back. Sleep came easy that night. No tossing, no replaying conversations, no mental spreadsheets ticking off worst-case scenarios. For the first time in months, I didn't carry their mistakes with me into the dark. The tether had snapped, and they didn't even know they were falling yet. Greg always got to the office before sunrise, as if outrunning the financial apocalypse he swore was just over the horizon. He was a creature of routine, black coffee, inbox, Bloomberg, stress. Same blazer every Monday. Same tie rotation. Same oversized desk with the same framed quote from his MBA program. Risk is managed, never eliminated. So when he walked into his office and saw a cream envelope marked urgent policy hold sitting dead center on his mahogany desk, it knocked his rhythm sideways. No sender name, just a bold typed notice inside. Coverage voided pending clarification of risk authority effective 12:03 a.m. His first reaction? Glitch. His second? Legal typo. Third? A new intern playing Mad Libs with insurance letters. He buzzed Sheila from legal. She arrived with a tablet, half a banana, and that usual look that said she'd already put out 5 fires by 7:30 a.m. "What's this?" he asked, sliding the notice across. She read it twice. And a third time, well, she said finally, could be a misfire. Sometimes the automated system's trigger holds if a credential update hasn't been confirmed. Greg pinched the bridge of his nose. "We did have a credential change yesterday. Nancy, she's gone." Danielle signed off on the removal. Sheila blinked. "Wait, they already processed the registry update? Last night, apparently." "Who's listed now?" she asked, pulling up the system. Greg just shrugged. "Danielle said the new guy's certified." "Jason?" The pause after his name was so long you could have driven a budget deficit through it. "Jesus Christ," Sheila muttered. Her fingers danced over the screen, scanning policy metadata like a surgeon hunting for a tumor. "There's no replacement credential logged." "None, just an open void." Greg's mouth went dry. "So what does that mean exactly?" "It means," she said slowly, "that as of right now, we don't have an active credential backing our liability coverage. And by policy language, that voids it. Temporarily." She gave him the kind of look usually reserved for people who ask if planes can still fly without engines. "Until a qualified, approved risk authority is designated." "Yes, temporarily." But she turned the screen toward him. "This clause here? Section 9.1? Credential must be continuous, uninterrupted, and tied to original policyholder unless otherwise reviewed and reissued. There's no review process logged. They didn't notify the underwriter. And since Nancy's credential was grandfathered in, Greg slumped back in his chair like the room had lost gravity. Across the floor, Danielle was already making her rounds, latte in hand, blissfully unaware that she'd kicked open the wrong door in the wrong century. When legal pinged her, she responded with her usual brand of dismissive sparkle. "Just have her re-sign something," she chirped. "She left on good terms, right? Just tell her to authorize the transfer until the new guy's certified." "She's not answering," Greg said, his phone buzzing unanswered for the third time in 5 minutes. Calls, texts, emails. Nothing. Danielle rolled her eyes like Nancy was being dramatic for not answering a company she no longer worked for. "She's not vindictive. Just explain we need a temporary sign-off." "She's not obligated to sign anything," Sheila cut in. "She's not on staff, no contract, no obligation." Danielle waved that away. "Whatever, this'll be cleaned up by EOD. You're all panicking over a technicality." Legal wasn't panicking yet, but something cold had crept into Sheila's voice, something quiet and serious. "This technicality affects every single contract with active risk clauses, including federal." Danielle hesitated just long enough to crack her confidence. "Fine," she said, grabbing her phone. "I'll email her. She'll reply." She didn't. Nancy's inbox auto-replied with a generic, polite message. "Thank you for reaching out. I am currently unavailable." Greg stood by his window a little after 10, sipping his cold coffee and watching the parking lot fill. Down there was the same chaos they all woke to every day: meetings, deadlines, petty complaints about stale bagels in the break room. What no one knew, not yet, was that every project marching ahead this morning was walking on air. No net, no insurance, no legal coverage if even a minor mistake popped up. It looked like a normal Tuesday, but the floor was already gone. At 10:47 a.m., the first call came in. It was Madison Langford, Director of Compliance from Draxon Tech, $48 million client with a chronic distrust of anything that couldn't be notarized, laminated, and locked in a fireproof drawer. Greg took the call on speaker, half distracted by an email chain unraveling about Q3 burn rates. Greg, Madison said, "No greeting, no small talk. We ran your insurance credentials through our system this morning as part of our milestone clearance process. It flagged a breach." Greg froze. "A breach. Your liability certificate lists coverage as void pending credential reassignment. We've paused all active milestones until we get updated proof of coverage. Our legal team is escalating to our risk oversight committee." Greg glanced at Sheila, who was already pulling up Draxon Tech's account folder. "That must be some kind of lag. We've got someone new stepping into the role." "I don't care who you plan to have," Madison snapped. "Your existing certificate is non-transferable. If you read the fine print, which I strongly suggest you do, you'll see the credential is tied to the policy, not the organization. It expires the moment the named authority is removed," which, it seems, happened at 12:03 a.m. Greg went pale. "We'll need a new certificate issued and reviewed," she continued. "And until then, all progress, payments, and third-party integrations are on hold." She hung up without waiting for a reply. 5 minutes later, 2 men in blazers and 1 woman with a barcode tattooed on her wrist showed up in the lobby, auditors. "Unscheduled but routine," they said. "Right." Sheila intercepted them. Greg tried to play it casual, offering a conference room and coffee like this was just another harmless paperwork dance. But 20 minutes into their review, the female auditor lifted her head and asked a question Greg had been praying no one would. Who's your current named certified risk authority? Greg stammered. Jason Reed. He's been onboarded. Credential ID? She asked, clicking her pen. Sheila typed, then frowned. There isn't one. It still shows Nancy M. Grayson as the last verified authority. Status, surrendered. The auditor raised an eyebrow. Then this policy is invalid. As of the moment she stepped down, Greg coughed into his hand, face red now. We're handling the transition. It's being processed. It's not a process. It's binary, the auditor said. Credential present or not. You're not compliant. That's a breach. Greg's voice cracked a little. We just need some time to, she cut him off. I suggest you alert your legal team. If even one deliverable lands while this breach is active, you're exposed. By 1:15 p.m., Danielle was in full damage control mode, chewing gum like it owed her money and pacing the legal floor in heels that clicked like a death clock. We have got to get Nancy back on the phone, she hissed. Just offer her something. Anything, say it was a miscommunication. Sheila, now buried under a mountain of policy PDFs, just kept reading, and then she found it. Here, she whispered. Clause 14.3 of the underwriter agreement. Everyone in the room paused. Sheila, read it aloud. Coverage is contingent on the continued certification of Nancy M. Grayson as named Certified Risk Authority. Credential is grandfathered under pre-2010 federal guidelines and not transferable to new appointees without board-approved escalation and direct supervision from the original license holder. Silence. Wait, Danielle said. So, we can't just replace her. Greg sat down like the air had been sucked out of him. Not unless we get her to supervise the new guy, and even that needs board approval. Danielle crossed her arms. That's insane. It's her license. We pay for it. No, Sheila said flatly. We never paid for the license. We paid for her. Outside the conference room, the hum of office life continued. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking, someone heating up tuna in the break room like a war crime. But inside, the atmosphere was pure dread in a tailored suit. Nancy wasn't just gone. She'd taken the whole damn safety net with her. Greg's forehead was slick with stress by the time legal met with him at 4:00 p.m. His tie had migrated half an inch off-center, unforgivable by Greg's standards, and his blazer was off, tossed carelessly across the back of a chair like it had personally betrayed him. Okay, he said, eyes darting across a spreadsheet projected on the conference room wall, which reports are actually blocked. All of them, Sheila said, voice dry as dust. Anything tied to federal funding or compliance oversight is legally unreportable without active coverage. Greg stared at her, but we've always reported quarterly by the 10th. These are due tomorrow, and they won't be accepted, she said flatly. We can't even log into the secure portal without a verified credential ID, and Jason doesn't qualify. Greg pinched the bridge of his nose. So what happens if we miss the window? You trigger contract noncompliance, Sheila replied, and you lose your preferred partner status on anything federal, which, if you recall, is over 40% of our revenue. The silence that followed felt less like quiet and more like a noose tightening. At 4:16 p.m., a second client emailed. Subject line, immediate action required project 11,082. Body, due to failure to provide valid insurance coverage, Draxon Tech is suspending all vendor payments pending resolution of breach. Further legal action will be assessed if status remains unresolved by EOD. That was the polite version of you're about to be sued into the crust. Danielle stopped pacing and sat down for the first time all day. Her hands were shaking, not a lot, but enough to notice. This is spiraling, she muttered. We need her back. Sheila didn't look up. Fired her? I didn't fire her, Danielle snapped. I executed a redundancy alignment strategy. Greg barked a bitter laugh. You executed something all right. Danielle glared at him. Don't start. This is a team failure. No, Greg said, voice hard now. This is your failure. You sliced out the one person underwriting our entire risk model because she wasn't shiny enough for your modernization campaign. Before Danielle could reply, Sheila's phone buzzed. One new email. Nancy M. Grayson, to legal at firm name com, subject. Credential clarification. Sheila opened it silently, eyes scanning, breath catching. Then she turned her screen around for Greg and Danielle to read. Just one attachment, one page. The original memo from 2013, scanned in grayscale, with a signature from an underwriter long since retired and a red-stamped header that read, coverage subject to Certified Risk Authority, Nancy M. Grayson. Credential non-transferable. Clause 8.7 enforced. No greeting, no explanation, no offer, no request, just proof. Danielle's face lost all its remaining color. She looked like someone had replaced her latte with a live grenade. She didn't send it to me, she whispered, more to herself than the room. Of course she didn't, Greg said, almost pitying now. Why would she? You fired her and sent her off with a branded stress ball. You don't get to ask favors. Sheila leaned back, folding her arms. That clause means we can't legally appoint a replacement without her supervision, and we didn't negotiate any supervision terms in her severance. Greg rubbed his temples, voice low and stunned. So we're trapped. Danielle shot up. No, no, we're not. We offer her something. Bring her back in, temporarily. 1/4. We smoothed this out. She's not asking to come back, Sheila said. She's not asking for anything. She just confirmed the trapdoor you all walked over. Danielle started pacing again, more frantic now. What if she talks to a competitor? What if she shares client names? She won't, Sheila said. She's too smart for that. But if she wanted to, she could end us with one phone call. Greg looked over at her. She won't return our calls, won't talk to HR, won't talk to management. But she did talk to legal. Sheila nodded, just enough to remind us of the clause. Not a word more. They all sat in silence then, watching the red dots on the compliance dashboard spread like a rash across their pipeline. She wasn't negotiating. She wasn't threatening. She was just gone, and she'd taken the firm's entire legal foundation with her. By morning, the only thing thicker than the air in the boardroom was the desperation clinging to Greg's voice. He called at exactly 7:42 a.m., like punctuality might soften the crawl he was about to make. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. Greg, I said evenly, watching the sun creep over my patio railing. Nancy, his voice cracked like a bad hinge. Hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. You did. A pause. He chuckled nervously. Yeah, fair. Another pause, then the real reason. I wanted to ask if you'd consider consulting, temporarily, just during the credential transition. Purely contract-based. Of course, remote, discreet. He was already backpedaling, sugarcoating it like this was a generous favor to me. Greg, I said, still sipping my coffee, the new person doesn't have the credentials. Right, but so there is no transition, I cut in. Just a mess you made trying to replace something irreplaceable. A long, hollow silence. I'm just asking for a temporary bridge, he said quietly. We're exposed. We can't move forward like this. I stared out at the quiet street beyond my window. A jogger passed. A dog barked 2 houses down. The world was calm. That sounds like a you problem, I said, then hung up. 20 minutes later, I got an email, not from HR, not from Greg, but from Sheila in legal. Short and surgical. Subject, update risk compliance remediation plan, body. Danielle Murphy has been removed from all insurance-related discussions effective immediately. Legal escalation has been initiated to the board per clause 14.3 protocol. That told me 2 things. 1, they finally realized Danielle's brand of corporate theater had a body count. 2, they were out of lifeboats and had started flagging down passing ships. I closed the email and opened my calendar. My next meeting was already highlighted. Thursday 11 o'clock a.m. meeting W/Eastgate Advisory Group. Subject, potential strategic partnership discussion. Eastgate wasn't just a competitor. They were the competitor. Newer, sharper, hungrier, and fully aware of the insurance clause that made me the last of my kind. The meeting had been scheduled a week before HR ever called me in, because I knew. I always knew. You don't spend a decade keeping a firm legally afloat without developing a sixth sense for rot behind polished smiles. And Danielle. She reeked of decay the moment she stepped off the elevator with her binder full of buzzwords. By noon, my phone rang again, this time from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, I got a message from Lydia Tran, former board member, part-time kingmaker, and my old mentor before she got tired of babysitting egos in suits. Nancy, it's Lydia. I've reviewed the file. You were right. You always were. The board wants to speak to you directly. This isn't about groveling, it's about survival. Call me. I didn't call her back, not yet. I knew the longer they squirmed, the clearer the picture became. I wasn't an employee they forgot to appreciate. I was the pillar they bulldozed to make room for a lobby fern. And now the roof was caving in. They could send all the cleanup crews they wanted. But I was already building somewhere else. Somewhere they couldn't reach. The formal offer landed in my inbox like a dove with a limp. Overdressed, overexplained, and underwhelming. Subject line, urgent reinstatement proposal, temporary consulting agreement, sender, Gregory T. Miller, CFO, CC'd. Legal minus Danielle, the attached PDF ran 17 pages. It used the word temporary 23 times, non-binding 11, and mutual flexibility like it was an emotional support blanket. Greg had tried to dress it up like a peace treaty, a limited engagement, discreet, remote, and under the understanding that the firm will concurrently pursue credential alternatives. Translation, you're a crutch while we shop for your cheaper clone. I replied with a single sentence, $400 an hour. No meetings, remote only. Clause 8.7 stays in effect. No exclamation marks, no pleasantries, just terms. They didn't respond for 3 hours. I assumed they were chewing it like glass. At 3:32 p.m., Greg called. This time I picked up. We're prepared to accept your terms, he said, dragging the words out like they cost him money per syllable. I hummed. I'll need it in writing, including my language. Unedited, he hesitated. There may be some pushback on hourly rate caps, then you can call someone else, I said. Oh, wait, you can't. He swallowed whatever protest was loaded next. I'll have legal reissue it, smart boy. The new contract arrived 20 minutes later. Shorter, cleaner, less condescending, but still bloated with nonsense. A reintegration period, status checkpoint reviews, a scheduled transition of oversight at the end of the quarter. I highlighted a single section, dropped in my own clause, and returned it. Clause 8.7. A during any transition period, All credential authority replacements shall remain non-operational unless supervised in real time by the original credential holder. Supervision must be contractually agreed upon by said holder. They didn't catch it. They were too busy exhaling. I signed, they countersigned, and just like that, I was back on the books. Sort of, to be clear, I never set foot in that building again. I never joined a call, never logged into a company server. My work came in encrypted packets, requests for sign-offs and brief notations, routed through legal-like messages to a ghost. Greg tried once, looped me into a status meeting. I replied with an invoice marked phone time unauthorized. $800. He never tried again. Danielle, for all her gum-snapping bravado, had vanished from every thread, every Slack message, every whisper in the break room. Word was she'd been transitioned to a special projects team, which probably meant a conference room without windows and a performance review shaped like a guillotine. But even with me back, the house was still burning. 3 days into our shiny new arrangement, another client pulled out, Draxon's subsidiary, Veldran Solutions. Smaller but louder. Their notice was curt: we require full policy reinstatement with original license authority or will terminate contract under clause 17.2. We will not entertain substitutions. The board called an emergency meeting that afternoon. I didn't attend, but I was told afterward that Greg, usually mild, eternally apologetic, slammed his tablet onto the table and muttered something unprintable about people who don't read the fine print. That's the moment they realized what I already knew. This wasn't a rescue, it was a leash. Temporary, fragile, and tightening. They thought the signature meant control, that the badge they stripped and the severance they calculated gave them the final word. But in their scramble to fix what they broke, they never noticed what I'd slid into the contract. A clause, a fuse, one last guarantee that this time, when they tried to replace me, they'd have to ask my permission. And I already had plans to be very hard to reach. The board call was already 20 minutes behind when they finally admitted me in, late enough to suggest they'd been arguing about whether to include me at all. My name appeared in the corner of the screen. Nancy M. Grayson, independent consultant. No video, no cheerful wave. Just my voice, calm as a cat watching pigeons from a high-rise window. Greg's feed flickered into view. He looked 10 pounds thinner and 5 years older, dark circles now a permanent feature. Lydia sat near the center of the table, reading something behind half-moon glasses and a poker face carved from granite. Danielle was there too, no gum this time. Just a blouse too stiff and a smile that couldn't quite find a landing strip. Miss Grayson, Greg began, clearing his throat. We appreciate you joining this call under short notice. The board has a few questions about our continued exposure and the current limitations on oversight transition. I cut in gently. You're referring to the installation of Jason Reed as the new risk officer? Yes, Greg nodded quickly. As you know, he's completed his certification and is prepared to assume full responsibilities. A few heads bobbed in hopeful agreement. I waited a beat, then another. Then sweetly, well, that does bring us to clause 8.7. The shift was immediate. Lydia looked up, Danielle froze. Greg blinked like I'd just whispered a death sentence. I continued, tone so polite it could have been read at a baby shower. Clause 8.7 of your emergency reinstatement contract clearly states, any replacement credential authority shall remain non-operational unless supervised in real time by the original license holder for a period of 12 months. Silence. Which means, I added, Jason can decorate his new office, but he cannot legally submit, sign, or approve anything risk-related without me watching. Danielle's lips parted slightly, then closed. She stood up slowly, walked out of frame, and didn't return. Greg's pen slipped from his fingers and clattered against the boardroom table. Someone, not visible, exhaled hard enough to jostle a microphone. Miss Grayson, Lydia said after a pause, voice low but steady, I assume you don't plan to continue this arrangement beyond the quarter? I smiled, not cruelly, not smugly, just factually. I assume you've read the rest of the clause, Lydia. You'll need my active consent to disengage it. That consent isn't given today. Another beat of silence. Then I clicked the leave meeting button. No dramatic exit. No sign-off monologue, just a gentle click. The call disappeared. I sat back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and stared out the window as sunlight split the blinds in perfect, symmetrical lines across my hardwood floor. A soft ping echoed from my laptop. Calendar notification, 11 o'clock a.m., subject, Strategic Partnerships Eastgate Advisory Group. I smiled again. Let them keep their scramble, their panic, their puppet risk officer and shredded contracts. I wasn't going back. I was building something they couldn't buy, fire, or replace. And this time, I wrote the clause. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.